Hello and welcome to Ask Lovecraft After Dark. Sorry for the slightly strange iteration of our current show. We are dealing with some technical issues and trying to figure out what software works for us in the wake of Google destroying how we used to record this show. But regardless, this is episode 40, and tonight I am really excited to announce that we have Ross Lockhart, an editor, a writer, and a publisher of Word Horde Press, which has published so many of the people that you have seen already on this show, and is publishing so many of the folks who've been on the show. Folks like Molly Tanzer and Wendy Wagner and Amber Fallon and Jeffrey Thomas, Cody Goodfellow. You have worked with an amazing crowd of folks. I got to learn your name very quickly as I got into this world of weird fiction and Lovecraftiana. So Ross, this is an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for.
So Ross and I have sort of known each other for a couple of years now, running around the con scenes and whatnot. I kept loitering at his table at Necronomicon and various other locales, and darkening the doorstep of his hotel room in Portland. But how long have you been at this sort of weird fiction game?
Professionally, since about 2007. But I've been a fan of weird fiction and dabbled in it as a writer pretty early on. So, but yeah, my editorial career, other than a couple of chapbooks, pretty much starts in 2007.
Okay. All right. And prior to that, were you just a fan? Were you just, someone who enjoyed kind of watching from afar, or have you sort of been involved and kind of embedded in this world, forever?
Well, I come from a point of fandom, but I wasn't really up on the scene per se. For a long while, I ran record stores and played in bands, and just kind of had fun, and really kind of came back to Lovecraftiana as an interest when I went back to college and decided to go to grad school, and was originally kind of headed towards the idea of teaching, and ended up going a slightly different direction for a while, and ended up working with a small press down in San Francisco, and learning as much as I could, and working on as many cool projects as I could, and meeting a lot of really fun, fascinating, incredibly intelligent, incredibly conversive writers. And then when I left that company, I said, well, I'm going to put up my own flag and call it Word Horde, and the rest is, kind of history. I think we're coming up on 22 or so books at this point in time. I haven't counted lately. But doing anthologies and collections and novels, some of which have gotten some really pretty good attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I started to get to know you, I want to say, would that have been around the Jack the Ripper time, or Frankenstein?
Well, the Jack the Ripper book came out back in 2013.
Okay, so yeah,
Frankenstein's a lot more recent. It was 2016.
Yeah, so I think Jack the Ripper was the first thing that I really began to see your name, and seeing people that I was beginning to be friends with, getting involved with, and getting excited for. Tell us about that. Tell us about what made you decide to go into the murky, blood-strewn streets of London.
Well, Victorian London in general is just a fascinating room. It's a place, kind of like ancient Rome, in that it's a scene where everybody who was anybody knew everybody who was anybody. And so you get these intersections of just fascinating lives, and people that you wouldn't think of even existing within the same time, shoulder to shoulder in a town in a time. And as part of it, the darkness of the Jack the Ripper stories always appealed to me. Not necessarily the case itself, but the fact that there are so many works of fiction and works of speculation around it. It's also a very technologically interesting era. You had really the birth of forensic science going on. You had cops photographing the eyes of victims in hopes of being able to project the killer on a wall. You had, this great combination of science and superstition and strangeness. And having read Jack the Ripper fiction over the years, I wanted to, contribute a little something to the pile, because there are a lot of great stories out there, but I wanted to give some of my favorite storytellers the chance to tell their own Ripper. And I was real happy with how that came out.
I imagine that you had perused Alan Moore's seminal title, From Hell.
Oh yeah, I've read From Hell, and the bit of that gets me more than the story itself is one of the appendices, the one about the gold chasers, and I think that almost could serve as a thesis for his entire sprawling work in it. That fascination with the people that want to say, no, he is Jack the Ripper. Wanting to convict somebody. Of course, I also think of, and I'm going to totally blank on her name, true crime writer, mystery writer who did the Jack the Ripper case closed just a few years ago, and she's so convinced that Walter Sickert was the Ripper that she convicted him in this book, and it reads like a real prosecutor, leaps of logic and all.
I mean, personally, my favorite iteration of Jack the Ripper would have to be David Warner's Time Out of Time. Just because I'm a massive David Warner nerd, and it's so bonkers, it's so gonzo.
Oh yeah, that's such a fun one.
If folks are unaware, this is the like 1970s, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I want to say 78, 79.
Yeah, and it's Malcolm McDowell as H.G. Wells, chasing through time to after Jack the Ripper. It was David Warner, and oh man, it's just the amazing 70s hair, the just bananas premise of it all.
I do think it needed more Morlocks.
Probably. When it comes to picking, these, as the sort of the publisher and editor, you get to kind of decide, all right, this is what I want to focus on. I want to see, I want to read 100 submissions about X topic. What is that process like for you for deciding, okay, what's going to be what's my slush pile going to look like this month?
Well, slush piles are masochistic, just by their very nature. But yeah, I do cheat that a little bit. I really do tend to do things invitation based, and by talking to certain people and encouraging them to, work with something that I want to work with. I want to see what they can bring to it, and generally they're folks that I wouldn't invite without knowing they're going to produce something awesome. I feel like I can take a few more chances that way. A lot of cold submissions, you get a lot of material that doesn't quite fit or takes entirely too long getting to what it needs to get to. And that can be pretty frustrating, because you don't want to go back to somebody that you don't know can edit a story down and say, oh, this is 12,000 words, man. This would be so good if it was 5,000. Because they'll invariably cut the wrong 7. And so again, if somebody really is looking to place a story with me, it's just best if they get stuff out there and get my attention. Rather than just going, hey, I heard you publish anthologies. I've got this, that, and the other. And it's just like, I don't even want to read that email. I don't know you, dude.
Yeah, I mean that's the hard thing, right? The sort of trying to get your sort of name out there, trying to get you're 10,000 hours in or whatever. I think that's been discredited at this point, but
Oh yeah.
but yeah, who you submit to and kind of how, who you're sort of attracting. We had John Langan on, and John Langan talked about, his sort of initial impulse was to kind of like start at the bottom of who he submits to and work his way up. And then his wife sort of told him, no, start with who you absolutely want to be published by and then work your way down.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who's the one who's being submitted to, do you get kind of a sense of the type of kind of either first-time writers you're getting to or first-time published writers you're sort of working with? Are most of the folks you tend to wind up publishing people who have published elsewhere, or do you find, oh wow, I've never heard of this guy, but she's done something amazing?
Mostly the former. Mostly I'm reading everything that I can get my hands on out there, and I want to see those new voices that are folks that are up and coming and cool. But also sometimes I do get that, hey, you gotta check this out. And when it comes from somebody I know and I trust, and who I think knows and understands the aesthetic I'm going for here at Word Horde, I'm generally pleasantly surprised. And I have picked up a few stories for anthologies out of that. And there are novels I've considered, if not purchased outright, that came over that way. But again, for the most part, I'm putting on a show. And that's an allegory I'll tend to use. I'm either going to go the rock and roll allegory, or I'm going to go the amusement park allegory, and they're really the same allegory. But I want to entertain the reader, and to do so, I need to stack that bill with stuff that I know is going to hit the reader in the right way and play with their emotions and drive them to want to read the next story and the next and the next, and really kind of take them on a journey. And so, if you're putting on a music showcase, you want a good band that's going to open it up and reward the people that got there early. You want a strong supporting act, and you want a main act that's going to just nail it and send the people home walking a foot in the air. So I feel the same way about an anthology. I want it to be an experiential thing.
Of all the anthologies you put out, and I mean, you've now touched on, Jack the Ripper, on the works of Lovecraft, I mean, you've run a gamut. Your Giallo anthology was fantastic. Your Laird Baron was so much fun. Which was the most sort of challenging and surprising to you as you began sort of working on it? Like which one sort of challenged your expectations the most?
Well, I wouldn't pick a subject if it didn't challenge my expectations. And usually I have an idea and I want to play with it. And of the various anthologies, it's like picking a favorite kid, but there is always that kid. So at the moment, I'm really still very enamored with how Eternal Frankenstein turned out. It was a really fun balance of authors, and I really felt like there were things said in that anthology that a lot of speculative fiction doesn't pick up. And a lot of the feedback I've gotten from it confirms that for me, that there are stories that really touch people on an emotional level and really do have the ability to draw someone back from a dark edge. And it's dark fiction, but I think we read dark fiction to, in some ways, make the light brighter.
And bouncing from anthologies to single author, works, novels, is that a major kind of gear shift for you? Or, when it comes time to kind of bounce to those different projects, do you sort of need something different? You're tired of essentially putting on the show. You want someone else to sort of do the heavy lifting.
Well, anthologies are a lot of fun. And it's really great to put a bunch of voices in chorus and be able to share that. But the marketplace wants novels. And to a lesser degree, the marketplace tolerates collections. Um, but there's still great ways to experience an author, particularly somebody that's new and up and coming and, again, has something interesting to say. So when I've taken on collection-based projects, it's generally been something where I admire the work the author is doing. I think I can help them get it to a bigger audience than other projects they've done. And when it works, it's wonderful. But that's one of those hard truths about publishing. It's very much a business of grabbing a handful of seeds and tossing it out there and going, I really hope some of this grows.
Well, you've got some pretty mighty seed on its way. You've got Jeffrey Thomas's newest coming out soon. What can you tell us about that?
Oh, coming very soon is called The Unnamed Country, and it is the first time anybody's collected Jeff's Vietnam-inspired stories. They are all set in a fictional analog to Vietnam or other Southeast Asian countries. It diverts in some ways culturally from actual Vietnam, but it's very much inspired by his family over there and people he met over there and the stories he experienced over there. And it's Jeffrey Thomas, so they're ghost stories and they're cyberpunk stories and they're strange stories. And so much of it just gets the hair up on the back of your neck, but also takes you to really just a sense of wound up place, if that makes any sense.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm really happy that that's coming out, and that's hitting really soon. It's within the next few weeks we'll have physical copies out, and we're gonna go live with the cover very soon. We're just getting all our ducks in a row and do that.
Now that's sort of one of the invisible yet incredibly visible part of publishing is art and art direction. We had on Lauren Panpinto a while back talking about being an art director, and is the sort of the unsung heroism of that world.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's what everyone sees in a book, and yet you don't think about the process of creating that art. And you've created some incredibly stunning covers and incredibly powerful, kind of gripping illustrations and art to kind of grab the viewer. I'm thinking of that really intense Giallo cover you guys did.
Oh, well, the design is a big part of what sells that as Giallo. But the original artwork by David Palumbo in that particular case is just such a striking, stunning piece. And I had worked with Dave he was art director at that San Francisco publisher. And so I got to know his stuff. Along the way, I got to learn from one of the just best artists in the field what to look for art-wise. And so just kind of by looking over his shoulder, I think I picked up a good bit. And that is appreciation of art, is observation. So any publisher that's got somebody that's doing art direction, that's doing a really good job, is primarily just good at looking at stuff and going, ooh, that's nice. Ooh, that's nice. Ooh, I want to work with that person.
Well, I think, I remember, again, so many people who've had on the show, Molly Tanzer's Vermilion cover was so striking. Brian Hauser, who's going to be coming on the show, his Memento Mori, which just came out. And then, of course, Lawrence Craigini's Spectral Hue, where it's an entire book about art, and you have to somehow capture that very specific color. Which, of course, as soon as I read that book, I was seeing that color everywhere I went. It was following me around. I went to pick up my kid from preschool, and there was just this painting staring at me. And I'm like, well, now I'm trapped in this world forever. Thanks, guys.
Well, that's one of the tropes of weird fiction is this idea of sensation. And generally, it's a hazardous sensation. It's something you obsess on over and over again. And it threads through Lovecraft, it threads through Poe, it threads through all these weird writers. But what I admired so much about what Craig did with the spectral hue was it's dangerous, maybe, but it's also rapturous, and that sense of the ecstasy of the supernatural, I think, is often missing in current horror fiction, and he really delivered on that. He gave us as much awesome terror in the old senses of both of those words as he did catharsis and joy.
No, that was an incredibly, I mean, we interviewed him a little while back, and just hearing him talk about sort of that process and just the personal journey he kind of went on, you can tell like it's an incredibly personal book, and yet it speaks to that sense of other and that outsider quality, which is at the heart of a lot of weird fiction. I mean, it's interesting to see it so explicitly laid out. Here's a story with all outsiders, queer characters of color, poor characters on the margins. And yet to have this shared sense of wonder and beauty, really, I don't know, it encapsulated something wonderful and optimistic in what is essentially kind of a sort of ghost story.
Yeah. And that's, again, that's a big part of what appealed to me about it. And with Craig's writing in general, he gets the attraction of the strange in a way that I don't think a lot of authors do, and I definitely don't think a lot of straight authors do. He enjoys the decadence of it and the prose, and I'm not going to call his prose purple. But
I mean,
that'd be
enough
that it can.
That'd be a little much.
Enough that it can serve the task. Yeah.
Now, speaking of obsessions, and this is getting away from literature for just a moment, but anyone who has followed Ross on social media will know that he has rekindled a love for gaming, for miniatures, for tabletop. It has been a beautiful thing to see. I'm not going to Ross, like, because I've enjoyed following you and seeing you talk about literature and seeing you talk about fine bourbons, but then when I'm suddenly seeing like skeletons and like weird little like Raoul Partha miniatures from the 80s like cropping up, I'm like, yes, this is the content I crave. What prompted this? How did you get back into this world? Because I've been in, like, I never left. Like, I've been like, I've got a big like box of D&D minis like literally right behind me here. So
so I needed a bit of de-stressing, and I needed something to keep me from tweeting back to a certain president.
Fair enough. This is your sheet cake, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, exactly. And it didn't hurt that the fine folks that publish Dungeons and Dragons put out the set of the core rule books with the Hydro 74 covers, and I was just like, those look like D&D books always should have. And so I jumped at it and picked up the set and rounded up some friends and said, we're gonna game once a month now. And it gives me a creative outlet where I'm able to kind of build a small portion of this world and let them play in it every month. And miniatures help, and hot gluing little buildings together helps, and I'm having a great time with it.
That's fantastic. Yeah,
and again, it keeps me off of Twitter.
Have you? I mean, like, one of the things that's amazing about D&D right now is just how much of kind of the zeitgeist it's become, right? I mean, there are so many streaming shows, there are so many podcasts. Like, it's mind blowing. I have to do a quick shout out to our good friends over at Microphones of Madness, who I've occasionally jumped on to play some D&D. They murderized a whole bunch of us in the Tomb of Horrors. But yeah, Rodney and Steve over there have been doing some really fun work. I ran a Numenera game for them. But yeah, this is just the era now where folks are jumping online and streaming and sharing, and people are consuming it. Like, I see I'm here on a college campus, and the number of kids here who are massive Adventure Zone like junkies is off the charts. Like, was that sort of a surprise coming back to this hobby a decade or two later?
It was surprising. I mean, the idea that there are Dungeons and Dragons rock stars out there blows my mind. But I'd kind of been aware of the edges of that for a while, through seeing folks that do cosplay, seeing a lot of kind of the book end of Instagram and such, where folks game as well. And so I've been seeing bits and pieces of people's game worlds, enough to know what the products were out there. And okay, those guys are playing Warhammer, those guys are playing D&D, they've got something else going on, and what the heck is that? So I was aware of it, but I hadn't really dived in. And there's so much media out there.
No, it's bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers. So, but I was excited to see, because again, it's not only the fact that you're jumping into it, but the fact that you had all this stuff from before, right? And so it's almost like being frozen in time and cracking yourself open and being like, what year is it?
It totally is. But that said, it's so much better to be able to play with adults and
Yes.
not kids' power fantasies like back in the day. And it's so much better to be able to pick, to put together a group of people that are going to role play and have a good time with it. And much like I curated an anthology, I curated my gaming group. They were all folks that had a shared connection, and they're all playing characters that are related to each other and are trying to figure out their common destiny.
Fantastic. That's really great. We actually have a question. I've put up a little question since we can't do this live, but I put it up on the Ask Lovecraft Appreciation Society Facebook group. Molly Tanzer, who I believe asks, Ross, you write fiction and also edit it. Which role is easier for you, the editor or the edited?
Editing fiction really feels very natural for me. I tend to be very inquisitive about things. I tend to overanalyze a lot of things, and so that kind of comes into play with it. And I'm detail-oriented enough to be able to spot themes and trends and things. That said, sometimes little things just slip by and somebody else notices, and then it's like, oh yeah, we knew about that all the time. Let's fix that. But writing's tough. And being edited, you go through stages with it where it's like, oh, well, that's a complete affront. You don't get this at all. And, oh, that's terrible advice. And, well, I guess it works. And, okay, that was a good idea after all. But you got to do that with everything. And so the anguish of writing can drive you nuts. Writing-wise, I tend to be a big pre-planner. So I spend a lot of time just noodling with it in my head and not writing and rewriting, but just kind of staring off into space. And oftentimes people, you're supposed to be working on this. And it's like, I am. That's how I do this. I'll get it down. But rather than outlining on paper and then transferring that outline over, I'm building my outline in my head for the most part.
Awesome. Well, we've talked about what you've done. We've talked about Jeffrey Thomas's work that's coming up, but further out, we also have Scott Jones's book, Stonefish. Yeah. We had him on just a little while back, and he gave us a little bit of that. What can you tell us from the publisher's end, what we can expect from Stonefish?
Well, Stonefish is coming in February. It is, well, somewhere between a science fiction novel and a horror novel, but leaning into that cosmic horror direction. It is a very Gnostic novel, a very questioning novel, very much looking at ideas of whether reality is a simulation or real and grounding and where the lines are with that. And it looks at some very old archetypes in the process and creates something that I think is quite astonishing. I've been a big fan of Scott's short fiction for a while, and it's been just a wonderful, trippy ride watching him put this together over the last couple of years. And if you're picking up his forthcoming collection, Shout, Kill, Revel, Repeat, you will notice some thematic similarities and some stories that are definitely set in the same world as Stonefish, although I'm not convinced all of his stories are set in the same world. But yeah, he's a really talented guy, and I'm really looking forward to showing this one off. And I've got Matthew Rivera working on a cover, and so I think it's going to look cool and it's going to feel cool, and I think folks are going to really dig it.
Awesome. I want to ask one more obnoxious question, which is, as a publisher, you obviously these anthologies, these collections, they take a lot of time. So you're often having to kind of anticipate trends and sort of where our tastes sort of going and flowing. If you could dictate trends, what would you like to see more of in this particular sort of publishing world? Like, do you feel like it's time to really lean into like full on brony, weird, fiction, weird horror? Or, is it time to get back to like, weird, like, 70s disco horror? What would you love to see if you could like dictate, all right, this is going to be in like 8 months, there's going to be a True Detective style show that's going to like make this particular genre explode, and it's going to be X. What is that for you?
I'm not even sure how I would answer that. It'd be fun to be able to predict these things, but it's so random and strange what catches on. Everybody talks about hype. Nobody really knows how to generate hype. You can create chaos and commotion, and you can draw people's attention to something, but if it's awesome, they're going to react like it's awesome. And if it sucks, they're going to react like it sucks. And sometimes you're right about what's awesome and what sucks. Sometimes you're wrong about it, and you're going to kick yourself over it for weeks. But 9 times out of 10, even when they don't notice something is awesome, it's still awesome. They just didn't notice it. But man, what would be cool and big and neat to see trend this year?
Besides impeachment, obviously.
Kindness would be really neat to see trend this year.
Kindness, okay.
Yeah, people just appreciating the works of others and raising them up and not tearing stuff down. That would be really great to see in this community.
Well,
what's your favorite new stuff?
That is a fantastic way to bring this to an end. Thank you so much, Ross. Ending that on a tasteful, classy. I was trying to like make things all dirty and dank and yellow journalism, and you rose above it. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Where are the best places folks can go to either follow you or learn more about Word Horde? What are the kind of the best landing places for them?
Well, Word Horde's on Twitter. It's on Facebook. It's on Instagram. Just look for Word Horde. You can find me, Ross E. Lockhart, out on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram as well. Although I'm trying to avoid Twitter.
Fair.
And you can find our books at all the usual locations. We're distributed by Ingram. So if your local bookstore doesn't have Word Horde books in stock, say, hey, can you get some Word Horde books here? But you can get them online. If you want to order from a cool local bookstore, local for me, Copperfield's Books in Petaluma, we'd be happy to ship stuff out of there for you. And you can call them. They don't do the internet that well.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Ross. for everyone at home, again, I apologize for our technical difficulties, but this has been Ask Lovecraft After Dark. I'm your host, Lehman Kessler. If you enjoyed Ask Lovecraft After Dark, you might also enjoy our sister program, Ask Lovecraft, which you can find at asklovecraft.com, as well as on Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr. We didn't have any nipples, so we were spared the giant Tumblr hurt. At least we didn't have too many nipples. Let me put it like that. You could also, if you've enjoyed this, usually this is a live show. If you would like to try to catch the live version of this show next time when we finally get our tech working, you can join the Facebook group, the Ask Lovecraft Appreciation Society. It's a very tasteful and classy collaboration, a group of fine people who aren't jerks, who try to appeal to that same sense of kindness that Ross just requested. Otherwise, if you'd like to find more about me and my live shows and my general goings-on, you can go to lehmankessler.com. If you want to see me screaming into the void on Twitter unwisely, you can go to twitter.com/lehmankessler. And if you've loved this program and you want to make sure we avoid any technical issues by dropping a coin into our coffers, you can go to patreon.com/asklovecraft. Thank you so much for watching. And Ross, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really excited to get the chance to see you again once my children let me attend conventions again.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everyone. This has been Ask Lovecraft After Dark. Be well.